everyone. Welcome to another episode of the USADA Pitch, where we cover news and operations that might be interesting to athletes and support personnel. In this episode, we'll be explaining how USADA and the Athletics Integrity Unit, or AIU, work together to optimize testing for track and field athletes. We'll talk about the frequency, timing, and processes behind this. I'm joined today by two subject matter experts on this topic, Laura, the Director of Science at USADA, and Tomas, the Head of Testing and Science at AIU. Welcome, Laura and Tomas.
Thanks, Avery. It's always great to be back on the pitch.
Hi, Avery. Nice to be here for the first time.
Thank you both. So let's dive in. What's the biggest benefit of the close collaboration between USADA and AIU?
Yeah, Avery. So obviously sport is global, and we realize that athletes are, training and competing all over the world. So for USADA, this means that our US athletes might travel overseas for training camps and competitions, and this can be quite logistically challenging for us to test. And similarly, the AIU is responsible for a global testing pool of athletes, obviously not just the US, and that means a lot of athletes in a lot of places.
Yeah, I would add that in addition, no surprise here, but USA is a key country for track and field. It's one of the most successful, if not the number one country in the world. So it's really important for us to be able to rely on a solid partner like USADA in such important country. So and the first reason is because this partnership allows us to cover a broad pool of athletes. The important what we try to achieve with USADA is to make sure that the national team competing at the major events, I'm talking about World Champs, Olympic Games, are adequately tested. And our collaboration with USADA allows us to cover a large pool of athletes in the USA, which is really important. I mean, USA is usually the biggest team at major events. And having this partnership allows us to cover a really large pool. It's all the more important in the US that there's a high density of top elite athletes, especially in like sprints, for example, in a lot of disciplines. And there's a trial system. So there's an uncertainty as to who is finally going to make the team. So having this large program in combining AIU program and USADA program allows us to cover this large pool and in the end to test the vast majority of athletes. And besides, there's a growing number of elite foreign athletes competing on the US soil. And for example, on the NCAA circuit. And actually USADA is assisting us testing those foreign athletes in the USA. And this is great. I mean, this is one of the USADA has this capacity as one of the only country in the world that has this capacity.
Yeah, I agree, Tomas. So the biggest benefit, I guess, for us for our collaboration is really being able to pool our testing resources to ensure that both the US athletes and the foreign athletes, so the training and competing in the US, are held to that same high standard of testing to ultimately promote clean sport.
And how do you make sure testing resources aren't wasted and that USADA and AIU testing doesn't overlap and conflict? I think that's probably one of the top questions that folks are going to want to know about here.
Yeah, good question, Avery. On a really regular basis, both our respective science, I&I, and testing teams get together and really try and optimize our testing strategy. So we're trying to, be as strategic and efficient with our testing resources as possible. And, that's basically not simply avoiding each other with testing. We're actually trying to be intentional with our plans. And at USADA, we also hope that if we can kind of carry some of that testing load in the US, being such a large federation, as Tomas said, that would allow the AIU to focus maybe more of their testing resources on smaller countries that don't have that same level of NATO support or funding.
Yeah, Laura, that's a very important point for the AIU. That's something that people should understand. This partnership and the mutual trust we have with USADA allows us to use our resources for other countries that need more attention. We have over 100 nationalities on the AIU testing program, which is a truly global program. Track and field is a universal sport. Unfortunately, there are still major discrepancies between national domestic anti-doping programs. And having this strong program in the USA allows us to focus our resources on other countries with no or very limited testing programs, and for elite athletes who may be challenging US athletes at major events. So there's a gap, and it's our role as international federation to fill that gap. But we only fill the gap because there's a strong program in the USA. But we think it's important for US athletes to know that.
Absolutely. Well, can athletes expect to see differences in the DCOs for AIU tests?
Yeah, of course. Even with a USADA test, athletes shouldn't expect the same DCO to be coming each time. Although, of course, the longer you're in the sport, I'm sure you're going to start to recognize some of the same DCOs. And for the test that the AIU conducts, they have the choice. So they can partner with USADA, in which case a USADA DCO will likely come who may or may not be familiar to the athlete. But they can also choose to use a third-party collection agency, in which case it would be a non-USADA DCO.
Although as Laura said, we usually use USADA and for our own testing. So there will be USADA DCOs doing our testing, but also we try to keep a proportion of independent testing within our program, so that there are other different phases. It's important for us to keep this independent proportion, but in the end of the day, the as Laura said, the sample collection procedure is pretty standardized. So there shouldn't be significant differences in the way tests are collected. And the DCOs we use are from private service companies which are operating in the US. And we ask them to change the DCOs, on a regular basis, so that to prevent too much familiarity between DCOs and athletes. It has some good sides, but we want to avoid keep some distance with the athletes while still being friendly and nice and professional.
Yeah, so I guess to summarize that, because it can be, a bit complicated with a multitude of different combinations of who could come and test, but, you could essentially be tested by USADA with the USADA DCO, by the International Federation, so in this case, the Athletics Integrity Unit, with a USADA DCO, or it could be the International Federation with a non-USADA DCO, a third-party DCO. And as Tomas said, everyone needs to follow the international standard of testing. So all the collections need to follow strict protocols and procedures, which are designed to protect athletes' rights. So if you ever have any concerns, make sure you note it on the doping control form at the time of sample collection, but also, please reach out to the AIU or USADA with those concerns.
Definitely. All right, that's a wrap for today. Tomas and Laura, thank you so much again for your time today.
Thanks, Avery. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks a lot.